This is the last week of our Christmas in July series, and so I did not want to disappoint you today by not wearing some kind of crazy shirt. And so, yeah, right? Want to carry on their tradition so you feel like you're right at home. I mean, you're at home. But okay, well, we'll keep going in there. I'm so excited that you have chosen to join us today. We are talking about generosity. This month has all been about being generous and what it's like to be generous and stuff, and how it is for us to be generous in this life. And so today we are continuing in that. We're going to talk a little bit about scarcity and abundance. But before we get there, I want to talk to us about being in the middle of something. How many of you have taken a trip this summer or are planning a trip or getting ready to? Do you know in the process of planning, do you know in that piece where you're like, yeah, we're going to take this trip. It's going to be so good. Yes. And you start in all of that planning and you go, this is going to be great. And you're like, we'll drive. It's cheaper. No problem. It'll be fun. And then it's only 9 hours. And then about 4.5 in, you're like, oh my gosh, why didn't we fly? Or maybe you're planning that trip with your family and you're like, family vacation, that's the best. All 20 of us together for 7 days. Oh, I love it. I can't wait. Then about day 4, you're like, oh, who invited these people? Or you say, I'm going to run this half marathon. It's going to be great. It's going to be so good. And then on that 7-mile run, you're like, who thought this was a good idea? Just me? Yeah, that one's me right now. Whoa, who thought that was a good idea? We get to these places in the middle, and we get to these places in life where we're in the middle of something, and it's like, oh, do we go back? Do we go back to where we were? Because I think it was better back where we were. Or do we go forward and go, okay, we can do this. This is going to be great. And sometimes in those places in the middle, we go to this place of scarcity. And we get into this mindset of, oh, there's not going to be enough. Like we get into the middle of something and we're like, whoa, there's not enough left anymore. I'm going to have to grab what I can because we're going to run out. Especially on family vacation, like, oh, grab those good things because someone's going to eat all the good snacks before we get there. Only maybe on my family vacation, but we get to that place where we begin to think of scarcity. And you know what scarcity looks like. If you've ever lived in Ohio in the wintertime and the meteorologist says, we're going to get a snow and there's going to be more than 2 inches. And you're like, whoa. I must have to go to the store. And you go to the grocery store and there's no milk and no bread because everybody has run to get milk and bread. I don't know what that is about Ohio that we feel like we have to get milk and bread. I've never been so snowed in that I needed milk or bread. But there's something about a snowstorm and like, oh, I think I need to go get stuff. We need to hoard what we can because you never know. We could be snowed in for months and we'll have to eat our children because the milk and bread is all gone. My children are grown, so I'd have to find some in the neighborhood maybe to eat. I don't know how that would work. I probably shouldn't think that far. But anyway, that's what scarcity is like. One of my favorite stories of scarcity is my friends John and Ashley live in Africa. They're here now. You'll see them soon. But they live in Africa, and when we've gone over to visit them, John and Ashley and Rachel and Justin and Jill have all been in this orphanage taking care. And what they do when they take care of these kids is they teach them games and stuff like that. And so they taught them this game called spoons. I don't know if you've ever played spoons, but you put all these spoons in the middle of the table, right? There's one less than there are people. And so then you have cards and you pass them around. And when you get, I think it's 4 of your kind, then you grab a spoon. And so when one person grabs a spoon, then everybody has to grab a spoon. And whoever is without loses. It's a game, right? But there's something about this. And the African children, when they play this game, it's like when somebody moves an elbow, they're all like, bah! And screaming and grabbing a spoon, and everybody's grabbing a spoon. You don't even know if anybody has anything, but you got to get a spoon. And so it's like you're grabbing for something because something could run out. And so this is this scarcity mentality, like, I got to get mine before it runs out. And we do that so much in our lives, and sometimes I don't know that we intend to go there, but we kind of ease over into that. And it comes across in our lives in so many different ways. A lot of times it comes across when we see people in our lives, and suppose we're in a work situation and somebody that we work with, we're equals, we work the same. They get a big raise and a promotion, and you're like, well, that's not fair. I work harder than they do. This company is not right. And we either begin to do something, or we plan, or we leave, and we're like, we need to go to someplace else because obviously these people are not fair. And so we do it sometimes with our children, and we say, okay, God, as a child, I've dedicated you to the Lord, but somewhere along the line, we feel like they don't make really good decisions, so we start to manipulate, and we start to, oh, no, you can't play with that friend. We're busy that day. And we start to make things happen and put them on the best teams or in the best place so that they'll be protected and good. And a lot of those things are good, but sometimes we try to manipulate because we're worried there's not going to be enough for our child, so we have to figure things out. And we don't necessarily call it scarcity. We just say, no. Like, I'm just helping along the way. I'm just helping that out. This is a problem that has gone on since the beginning of time. And so we're going to read in Scripture today where this happened really prominently, and it's in the book of Exodus. So in the book of Exodus, we're going to look in Exodus chapter 32, but I got to tell you what's happening before we go there. And so Exodus, appropriately named by the Bible scholars, is about the Exodus out of the slavery of Egypt into the promised land. And this is where God has taken these people who have been in slavery for 400 or so years, and he takes them into, and during this season of generosity, we've talked about how this was a detox for them to learn how to live in freedom. And so in this time, as he takes them out of slavery, he parts the Red Sea and they can walk on dry ground. God has given them a cloud during the day to travel so they can see where to go. And at night, he's given them this cloud of fire so that they know they're protected. In the midst of this time, God has been there for them, and he has provided food for them. He provided food to fall from the sky, and they would eat this food. And all along, they have seen God work, and their leader, Moses, has oftentimes met with God, and he has been up to the mountain, and there's this huge cloud that comes over the mountain. Moses talks with God, and then he comes back down and tells everybody the instructions that God has given him. And so this is a pattern that they've seen before, and that they've spent these years with God seeing him move until this time. And so in Exodus chapter 32, it says, when the people saw how long it was taking Moses to come back down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron. Come on, they said, make us some gods who can lead us. We don't know what's happened to this fellow Moses who brought us here from the land of Egypt. Let me just pause for a second. I don't know what happened to Moses. He's gone. He's been gone so long. He must have gotten eaten by a bear. We haven't seen him. It's this all of a sudden, like here Moses is our trusted leader, and all of a sudden he's like, I don't know. He's just been gone so long. He's probably not with us anymore. I don't know if you've ever gotten to the place where you're like, I think I've been forgotten by God. Like, I don't hear or see anything. This is what they do in that situation. Aaron's the second in command. So Aaron says, take the gold rings from the ears of your wives and sons and daughters and bring them to me. And all the people took the gold from their ears and brought them to Aaron. Then Aaron took the gold, melted down, and molded it into the shape of a calf. When the people saw it, they exclaimed, "Oh, Israel, these are the gods who brought you out of the land of Egypt." Aaron saw how excited the people were. So he built an altar in front of the calf, and he announced, tomorrow will be a festival to the Lord. The people got up early the next morning, sacrificed the burnt offering and peace offerings, and after this they celebrated with feasting and drinking and indulged in pagan revelry. I'm sure the pagan revelry part is not very good. But here they are in this place, and here they can see this cloud up there on this mountain. And Moses has been gone too long, and they're like, I don't even know what's happening anymore. He's just gone. Aaron, do something. Let's go back to what we know. Aaron, make us something that we can see. Put something in front of us so that we'll know what it is. And so Aaron's like, yeah, okay, take off your gold. Later on, when Aaron gets in trouble, he's like, I don't know, I put it in there and this calf came out just like that. I don't know how it happened. And so they said they set it up and they set this big festival like they would worship God, but now there's something here because now they can see it. Now they've taken control of what's happening. Now they know it's okay because they've gone in and made this happen. So it must be okay. But this is what happens next. The Lord told Moses, quick, go down the mountain. Your people who you brought out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. How quickly they have turned away from the way I commanded them to live. They have melted down gold and made a calf, and they have bowed down and sacrificed to it. They are saying, these are your gods who brought you out of the land of Egypt. How quickly, God says to Moses, how quickly these people turned away. How quickly we get into the scarcity. There's not going to be enough. God has forgotten us. He's not here. How quickly we've gotten to that place. I have to grab a spoon. Oh, wait, I need to go get milk because there's not going to be enough and I have to have it. You see, we do that spiritually as well. We do that with God, and if we get forgiveness and we ever make another mistake or we ever sin, we're like, oh, there's not enough forgiveness. There's not enough to give around. God will not forgive me again. Or sometimes we pass that on to other people. We get forgiven, but when somebody hurts us, we then say, yeah, I already forgave you twice this month. You have reached your limit. Or we begin to say, no, you don't get any more grace. Listen, you keep doing the same stupid things. We're not doing this again. And we get into this and we have to hoard it. We have to hold on to it. And we grab tight. We got to grab that spoon because we see others grabbing. And we're like, oh, wait. There's not going to be enough. I need to make sure I have some. And we live in this space where we're fearful. Or we live in the space where we need to take control because we don't see God working anymore. I don't see him doing it. I asked him just yesterday and he hasn't done anything. I'm probably going to have to take over. I'm probably going to have to be the one that makes things happen now because apparently God's not listening. And so we quickly get into this place where we're like, I'll just handle it. God, let me tell you what I did. Let me tell you how I fixed it for you because you're not here anymore. I can't see you. I can't see you working. So I'm going to make this calf and put it up there. I just don't think it's intentional. I think it's sometimes we slip there and we get stuck in this place where we think there's not enough. But that's not where God calls us. You see, God calls us to live in this place of abundance, a place where there's more, a place where we understand that there's always going to be enough. And there's a great example of that in the book of Daniel. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Daniel. Daniel is this Egyptian. No, he's not. He's not an Egyptian. He's an Israelite. Daniel is this Israelite, and he grew up knowing God and loving God, and he is someone who grew up in freedom, not in slavery. And so Israel is captured by Babylon, and so Babylon has come in and taken over the entire country, and they take their youngest, brightest men, and they want to use them for their own good, for their own army and places like that in Babylon. So Daniel has been taken, and early in the book of Daniel, he's taken with his three friends. You may have heard of them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or Rakshak and Benny. he takes these guys and he brings them in, and these guys are the brightest, and they have continued to follow God and do what God has wanted them to do, even in the midst of exile. They work really hard and they do great things. And so this is where we are when we pick up with Daniel chapter 6, where he is in this part. All right, so in Daniel chapter 6, starting with verse 2, it says, "The king also chose Daniel and 2 others as administrators to supervise the high officers and protect the king's interests. Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and high officers. Because of Daniel's great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Then the other administrators and high officers began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling government affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize or condemn. He was faithful, always responsible, and completely trustworthy. So they concluded our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel would be connect him with the rules of his religion. So the administrators and high officers went to the king and said, 'Long live King Darius. We are in agreement, we administrators, officials, high officers, advisors, and governors, that the king should make a law that will strictly enforce, give orders for the next 30 days. Any person who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to you, your majesty, will be thrown into the den of lions. And now, your majesty, issue and sign this law so it cannot be changed, an official law of the Medes and the Persians that cannot be revoked.' So King Darius signed the law." Let's stop there a second. Of course he signed the law. They came up to him and they're like, "King Darius, you're the coolest guy ever. You are so great, King Darius. We just love you. And so we love you so much. We want you to sign this thing. We want you to make it like nobody can talk to anybody but you, King Darius." He's like, "Well, that's a great idea. I like that." And so he signs this. And immediately what that means is if anybody prays to anybody other than King Darius, they'll be thrown to a den of lions, which was corporal punishment back then. And so that's what was happening. So here's Daniel. He knows this now. He's a part of the council, not this meeting, but he's a part of this council, and he knows that this law has just been signed, that it's not to be reversed in any way. And so here Daniel is in this middle place, like, oh man, how'd we get here? And this is what he does. In verse 10, "But when Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with its windows open towards Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to the Lord." Just as he had always done. Daniel went upstairs in the midst of this new law that has been put out, and he did just as he had always done. He prayed. He didn't know what would happen. He knew that there was a law that he could be thrown into the den of lions, and he knew that he could do that, but he prayed as he always did. You see, he knew that even when it's not okay, it's going to be okay. He knew that God had enough for him. He knew that God would protect him no matter what. He knew that no matter what would happen, that it would be okay. He lived in this space of abundance. He lived in this space where he knew that in the midst of all this, it was going to be okay. And he knew that he had more of what God had given him than what everything else could happen around him. And so he prayed. He had a lot of options at that point. He could have hidden in a closet. God hears us in closets. He hears us in all those tiny places. But he didn't, because he stood in this place of abundance. He stood in this place knowing that when it's not okay, it's going to be okay. This past week in my family has been the phone calls that you don't want to get. The multiple of them. I have a sister whose husband is not doing well at all. Terrible. I have another sister who has a daughter who's not doing well at all. Terrible. And so I got these phone calls all this week, and I'm like, what is happening? My first thought is, God, why are you raining down on us? What did we do wrong? You see, I jumped right into scarcity just like that. God, how come we did what could be happening? Maybe it's my sisters, maybe it's not me. I did think that, to be honest. I was like, maybe they did something wrong. But then I also realized that, God, no matter what happens in this, you are still God and you still love us. That in the midst of this misery, in the midst of this hard, in the midst of this place, that God, you still love us. And even when it's not okay, it's gonna be okay. I don't know the outcomes. I'd love to tell you, I got another call that said, yeah, everything's good, we're great. Nope, we're still in the midst of it. But in the midst of that, I know that God is with us. I know that when I can feel secure in God's love, when I can know that God loves me beyond everything else, when I can know that God is for me, then I can be okay when it's not okay. I can step into the abundance. I can do like Daniel did, and I can pray as I usually do. I can say, God, it's gonna be okay, even when I don't feel like it's gonna be okay. See, stepping into this abundance allows us to see the world a little bit differently. Stepping into this abundance of God allows us to see that when we're at work and we work as hard as everybody else and we work really hard and strong and somebody besides us gets promoted, we can say, good job. I am so glad for you, because we know that there's gonna be enough for us. We know that we're gonna be okay. We know that in the midst of all of this, when our other friends' kids are all doing great things, they get into the Harvard, Ivy League schools, we don't have to pay for their entrance because we know it's gonna be okay if they go to local college. We know that it's gonna be okay wherever people go. We know that it's gonna be okay because our children have to forge their own path. And as much as I would love to control their destiny and make sure they marry all the right people and have all the perfect kids and do all that kind of stuff, I know that it's going to be okay in the midst of all of that because I trust God with it. And I'm not as good as he is in picking things out. I'd like to think that I was, but I'm not. So how do we step into this abundance, and how do we live into this abundance, and how do we step into it and know that we are okay and that we can live in God's love? David, who we read about in the Old Testament a lot, was a king, and it always said they had a heart after God. And he wrote these psalms and these songs a lot. And one of the psalms that he wrote was in Psalm 118:24. And it says, "This is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it." If you grew up in church, this is a song that we used to sing. This is the day. I can't sing, but it goes something like that. And you could sing it. We used to sing it in rounds. Like this group would start and this group would start. And it'd be so fun. And I thought, we should do that today. But then I knew that we couldn't because I would have to lead it and that wouldn't go so well. So I decided we'll just talk through it instead. So this is the day that the Lord has made. It's the reminder that this is the day the Lord has made. We have this day. Let's be excited and rejoice in it. We can rejoice in what God has made. But then as I began to study more, and I began to study more about the scarcity and this abundance, I realized that abundance is a mindset. Abundance is us to understand that it's more than just, I can be generous because I have so much. I can be generous because I got wealth of everything I can give because I have that. No, abundance is understanding that this is the day that the Lord has made. This is what I have right now. This presence is what I have. And I can rejoice to know that I have enough for this day. That God has given me this day and that I can rejoice in it. And I can know that there is enough of God and that his love flows. In fact, when Jesus was on the earth and was walking, and God sent him here because they had lost sight of who God was. And so God sent his son here to remind them of his love. And Jesus comes up to this woman who's sitting at a well. And first of all, he shouldn't have talked to her because she was a woman. And then she was another nationality, and he really shouldn't have talked to her then. She was from someplace different. But he spoke to her, and she came to the well, and he was like, do you want some water so that you will never be thirsty again? She's like, yeah, I don't like come to this well. They don't like me. They're mean. Girls can be so mean. And he said, no, I'm not talking about that water. I'm talking about this thing that lives inside of you, that bubbles up, that flows continually, that never runs out. Jesus said, that's what I want to give you. And see, that's what he wants us to have today. This continual love that never runs out, that we can step into the mindset of abundance, that we can know that God will not run out, that God does not leave, God does not hide from us. He is forever working with us and in us and through us. And we can be secure in that. And we can know that God is enough and that doesn't run out. That's what we need to hold on to.